Hi, everyone. I'm Linda Sheldon-Feld with the International Grief Institute, and this is Moments of Hope. And tonight we have a guest, Ryan Backmann. He is the founder and executive director of Project Cold Case out of Jacksonville, Florida. And Ryan, welcome to the show, first of all. And how is your weather doing down there?
So far, still really hot.
Okay.
About 90 degrees today, but we're holding steady watching that storm.
Yeah.
The 1-year anniversary of having to evacuate this time last year. So we're hoping no more evacuations this year.
Well, I will pray for your safety because it's a little scary always. You know, up here north of Seattle, we don't get hurricanes. And so as the news shares with us, part of our country in jeopardy and danger from a hurricane is always nerve-wracking. So I will keep you in my prayers for safety. And I'm glad that we're okay for tonight. So Ryan, you were 31 when your dad, Cliff, was 56 years old, and he was on a job site, a construction site, and he was doing something when suddenly he was shot in the back.
Yeah.
And the assailant or assailants, all they got away with was your dad's wallet, and yet it took your father's life. What was that like?
Well, my dad was a construction worker. He was a blue-collar guy. He worked Monday through Friday on one construction site, and then on Saturdays he'd pick up side work doing, any kind of random, construction site cleanup or side job to make a little extra money. And, he didn't have a lot of money. That's what he did. He worked 6 days a week to make ends meet. My stepmom was suffering from terminal cancer at the time, and so he was working to help with make ends meet within the house. And it's something I don't know the answer to, how much money was in my dad's wallet. It was a Saturday afternoon in the middle of the day. He may have gotten paid that day before, and he may have cashed his check, so he might have had a few $100s in there, but the likelihood was that he probably didn't have much cash in there at all. And the kind of scary thing was that whoever did this walked in, shot him first, and then took the wallet. And I think that, he might have gotten away with nothing, honestly.
So it's not even like he gave your dad the option, hand me your wallet or I'm going to shoot you.
Yeah, it doesn't appear that way. I mean, again, from the investigation, what they have been able to figure out, and then my dad actually lived long enough to call 911, and he spent the last 7 minutes of his life on the phone with a 911 operator trying to describe the person that had just shot him, ultimately losing consciousness on the phone with that dispatcher. And so from what they can gather from that phone call and the evidence, it appears that he was shot first and then the wallet stolen. And my dad was a big guy like I am, and he was a construction worker, and I'm sure he wasn't thrilled with the fact that somebody was coming in to steal from him while he was working on a Saturday.
Right.
But I think if he had the opportunity to see the gun and see the severity of the situation, he most likely would have just handed it over.
Right. It's just mind-boggling to me, though, that someone would, in cold blood, murder someone over a wallet, the contents of a wallet. So you turned your pain into purpose and founded Project Cold Case in 2015.
Yes.
To help families like your own navigate through the system. Was your dad's case at that point already called the cold case?
Yes. So my dad's murder happened in 2009, and in 2010, I switched careers and became a victim advocate and helped other people that had lost loved ones to homicide. But the majority of my time was spent in the courthouse or with meetings with the state attorney's office and prosecutors, trying to help families navigate the judicial process, which is a whole nother animal. And I did that for 4 years plus, but along that way, I met a lot of other families that had unsolved cases, and we would kind of get together and talk about how, we didn't know the prosecutor. We had never had a meeting with the state attorney's office. There was no judicial process when there wasn't an arrest made. And I felt like that was a smaller population of homicide survivors that was kind of forgotten. And there weren't really a lot of resources out there for them. And so in 2015, I decided that I could start an organization that would focus there. At the time in Jacksonville, we had a number of organizations that were helping families that had lost loved ones to violence. And I didn't want to duplicate what everybody else was doing. And these cold cases were, a lot of times families thought that everybody had forgotten about their loved one and that there was no one looking and that no one else cared.
Well, and I think also it's like living with the boogeyman. You don't know if the person next to you on the bus or in the cubicle next to you could be what is that like? Do you walk along the street and wonder if that cashier or if that doorman was the person who took my father's life?
Yeah, there are definitely times where I have that thought in my head. And, one of the things I realized along this journey was when I would tell people my story, they were, very sympathetic and compassionate at first to my face. But then when they left, I never heard from them again. It wasn't really, they kind of felt removed from it. And so, as one of the hardest things for us to do, and this, is to get people who have not experienced what we've experienced to really care and to take notice. And
right.
So what I found was that if I made it more of a public safety issue than just about me and my dad, and if I said, look, the person that killed my dad could be behind your, wife at the grocery store or live next door to your child's bus stop. Well, now it's an issue that everybody can get behind and be supportive of.
Making that emotional connection for people, right, so that they understand that this is a danger. This is the boogeyman's walking around and no one knows who he is yet because he hasn't been caught. So you created Project Cold Case to bridge the gap between information, families, and law enforcement.
Right.
And do you feel that sometimes, families who've lost someone to homicide and it's unsolved, there's a lot of emotions at stake. There is, you've got an extra layer of emotion. Do you ever feel like law enforcement is willing to work with Project Cold Case and the families, or do they say, you're getting in the way? At what point are you getting in the way?
So that was a big thing when we started the organization, because law enforcement is a tough nut to crack. If you're not one of them, then you're on the other side of that thin blue line, and it can be very, very hard to kind of make inroads into law enforcement. I was lucky that the law enforcement agency that was investigating my dad's case, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, always treated me with respect. They were always honest with me. I have heard other horror stories from other agencies, but I was lucky. And it took me years to build those relationships to the point where they trusted me and now will refer families to me, refer families to Project Cold Case. They'll stand, at a podium next to us. They'll participate in our events. And that is spreading now because we've been able to do that with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, and then some other agencies have taken notice. I'm also on the statewide Cold Case Advisory Commission, which has 3 sheriffs from other jurisdictions in Florida and then countless other detectives and investigators. And that gave me an opportunity. Not only did it give victims a voice at the table for the first time in Florida, but it allowed them to get to know me and know that my goal is not to point fingers and say, right, law enforcement is the problem, they're bad. Look, they're human. Some of them have made mistakes, and there are obviously times where they have made the wrong decisions and maybe not done a great investigation. But my experience with my dad's case and then what we have been able to do moving forward is quite the opposite. Most law enforcement sees Project Cold Case as a benefit to them. Let's be honest, their job is not to deal with the families. Their right. job is to solve the case.
Right.
And that's where we come in. When those families call and they're upset, and rightfully so, they're frustrated, law enforcement can say, here's somebody else's number to call, and vent that frustration.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine it's somewhat like a surgeon trying to perform surgery with the family in the operating suite. A lot of distractions and such. And it's if you can have someone, give them information, be that liaison, I would imagine that it actually helps everyone. But, with law enforcement, these are the good guys who put their life on the line when they go out their door, their home, when they leave their home every morning. They're putting themselves between us and the bad guy. They're putting their very life on the line. Yet, in today's world, we've entered this era where there's a distrust of law enforcement. And so, do you think that that distrust is really hindering law enforcement's ability to solve cold cases? If witnesses aren't willing to come forward, or they don't trust the police, how do we solve that?
Yeah, I believe that is a big part of the problem out there is a distrust between some of the public and the police. And, one of the things that Project Cold Case, I'm proud we have been able to do, I believe, is eliminate at least some of that, because we feel like working with law enforcement is going to get us a lot farther and resolve a lot more cases and help a lot more than working against law enforcement. And so we have partnered with many different agencies, and we do local spots with the media. One news station in town does 2 cold cases a month through us and the local sheriff's office. And then another station does one every other month or so. And each of them has a little different platform. But I saw a difference in the community and in the families we serve when they saw the detectives on that news segment standing there with the case file, as big as it was, and talking about that and showing a concern, a genuine concern and a care, and showing that there was stuff going into those investigations, even, sometimes decades later. And you could physically see a change in a lot of the survivors and families that we deal with. And when those shows go away, because as we know, at some point the news station is going to say it's not gaining as many viewers as it was, and they're going to move away from it, just like that, happens. I think that's going to be a problem for law enforcement too, because I think that that's going to take them away from that community connection that they have right now with cold cases. And we're not naive. Cold cases have a kind of pop culture phenomenon right now, and everybody likes to watch them on TV and watch the CSIs and the NCISs and the Criminal Minds, and we have to ride that wave, and we have to make sure that while people are interested, we're getting their attention.
Sure. And through what you do, you're educating people and raising awareness, and that's critical. And so the number of cold cases, despite DNA evidence, the technology that law enforcement now has at their fingertips for solving crimes, although that has increased, the number of cold cases has also increased. What was the statistic that I saw? Let me see here. According to the FBI, nearly 185,000 cases of homicide and non-negligent manslaughter went unsolved between 1980 and 2008. That's almost 200,000 cases in the United States.
Yeah.
And so, with the advances in technology helping law enforcement solve cases, why is it that cold cases are going up?
Well, a couple of things. One, that FBI statistic is probably low because of how they collect their crime information. Okay. There's a nonprofit out there called the Murder Accountability Project, and their number from 1980 to now is over 230,000 unsolved murders. And so it's probably somewhere in the middle there. But that really causes pause for people, because that's way too many homicides to go unsolved. And as you brought up, I can't remember the exact statistics, but in 1960, something like 90% of homicides were solved. And now the national average is below 60%, and it's fallen that much. And it changes according to the state. And so some states have a higher clearance. Sure.
and others have a lower clearance. And is that because of tax dollars? Is it because too much crime in some of those states and not enough law enforcement because not enough tax dollars to go around? How do we work with that?
It's a big combination of all of the above. It's there are urban areas, big cities that have higher crime rates, and less people engaged in the community and saying what they saw, and telling people what they've witnessed out of fear. And then there's rural communities where they're not dealing with it as much, and those numbers fluctuate year to year. Where on a bad year the percentage can be a lot lower. And what I want people to realize, in a city the size of Jacksonville, we're going to have 100 murders a year. So whatever that percentage is, if it's 60% clearance or less, that's 40 unsolved murders a year. I mean, let's say at a good year where 60% are clear, that's 40 murders a year that go unsolved. And in Jacksonville, we have over 1,500 unsolved murders, probably back to the 70s. Yeah. And when my dad was one of those, it is one of those, and I thought I was alone until I started doing that kind of research and finding out those numbers. And then I realized not only was I not alone, but there was a lot of people out there that were dealing with the same thing I was, but there was nowhere really for them all to come together and kind of seek resources. And that's why, like you mentioned, honestly, when we started, I just wanted a place where people could go and post a picture of their loved one so they knew that someone else cared. I mean, that's really what it started out as, is, let's let people know that their loved one still matters, no matter when they were murdered. Just because it's not solved, they're not forgotten. And it just quickly evolved. And I think people started to see the value of it, not just the families, but the public. These are bad guys on the street that need to be off the street. And law enforcement started to see the benefit of using an organization to kind of buffer between the investigators so they could do their job and investigate. And we could do our job, which is to advocate and raise awareness, and then just be there for these families, someone that they could talk to and listen to.
Right. And so what constitutes a cold case?
So most places, there's not really like a legal definition of a cold case. And what most jurisdictions do is, at the point where you run out of leads and tips, you've investigated all the leads, you've sent all the evidence to the lab, and it's come back and there's no suspect developed or not enough evidence to arrest a suspect that has been developed. You literally run out of things to do with that case.
Okay.
And so that's what Right. Not typically. So in a city like Jacksonville, it's not uncommon for a case to be a year and a half old before an arrest is made, and it was never really a cold case. But in other jurisdictions where they're much smaller and maybe they only have a handful a year, typically if a year's gone by and it hadn't been solved, it's cold. So we try not to use, for our organization, we ask families to wait a year at least, and that gives most agencies we feel like enough time to do some due diligence and at least identify a suspect and get all the evidence back. And if by that time they haven't, we'll put it, on our site. If a family wants it, we'll put the picture of the victim on our site if that's what the family wants.
So that brings me to my next question. What can families do to help law enforcement? And what shouldn't they do? What gets in the way?
So a lot of things, I'm glad you asked that question, because what you should do is stay engaged and talk to them and ask them, what you can do to help. That was a frustrating thing for me, because you always feel like you should and could be doing more. And honestly, investigators don't want or need the family doing any investigating on their own. It can really, can upset a potential prosecution, and the last thing you'd ever want to do is jeopardize the prosecution of a murder of your loved one. So I always tell families, let the investigators do their job. Use social media. Ask your neighbors, your friends, your family to share the story of your loved one. Beg the community to come forward. Increase the reward if possible. We have a really good relationship with the Crime Stoppers here in town. They do a wonderful job with rewards, and there's up to a $3,000 reward for murders, if you give information, you can remain anonymous and you're going to get $3,000. They always say up to $3,000, but that's because they pay for, stolen bikes. They give out rewards for all kinds of things that are, the value is not $3,000. But if you, witness, an aggravated assault, you can, call anonymously and turn them in. You may only get $100 or, a couple $100. I don't know. But if it's a murder or a rape or something like that, you're going to get the max, here in our jurisdiction. And you will remain anonymous. I know there's some concern out there that people feel like, they can't give me my money if they don't know who I am. But they have a system, and they have a system basically where they create an account based on numbers just for you. And when you call in a tip, if that tip leads to an arrest, then you will get notified that this is your account number, and you can go to the bank and withdraw the money that's in that account, and nobody's going to ask who you are, what your name is.
Is that right? That's good to know, because we have such a prevalent culture of no snitch.
Right.
And, that is frustrating, not just for the families, but for the law enforcement. I mean, they're going out there into territory where no one wants to snitch. And, that has to really hinder their ability to gather information and connect the dots. And,
and there's multiple facets of that, because there could be legitimate fear, and it's hard to convince somebody that's scared for their safety to sacrifice that, for somebody else. But then there's literally people that just don't like police, so they're not going to talk. That's a different angle. And then there's, believe it or not, there's people out there that don't necessarily know that they have information on a case. They may have saw something begin or heard gunfire, and they just tried to get out of there, and they may actually have the key because they saw the red truck driving away from the scene. And so this is a big reason why we want to use social media to raise awareness for these cases, because years later, maybe somebody decides, hey, remember that night we were leaving the club and, somebody started shooting and we got out of there? Whatever happened to that? Did they make an arrest? And, where can they go to find out if they made an arrest or not?
So where can they go?
Well, our website, hopefully. Our goal is to, our goal now, we have over 4,000 cases in our database from mostly around Florida, but any family from anywhere in the country that submits a case to us, we will add their victim, add their loved one to our wall on our website. We will spotlight the case at some point through social media and try to raise awareness. We even push it out to the local media wherever they are and say, hey, look, we're an organization in Jacksonville and we're trying to raise awareness for this case. Can you get on board and maybe do an interview with the family? Something people don't realize right now, with technology being the way it is, not only is there a good chance that old cases maybe haven't been looked at in a while have evidence that can be tested or retested, but the majority of cases, cold cases, are solved not because of technology, but because of a change in relationship. So somebody that was maybe in an abusive relationship or maybe had a dependency issue or things like that years ago, they've found a new way in life and they're willing to come forward and talk. And those are the cases that are solved more often than not. It's literally somebody who finally is coming forward for whatever reason. And that's why it's so important to get the information out there.
And so Project Cold Case, and your website's projectcoldcase.org, you serve families all around the United States.
Right. We do. We have a grant that allows us, that pays us to work. We have a staff. We have an office in downtown Jacksonville. There's myself. There's Patty Lord, who you've actually had on this show before. She's our lead victim advocate. And then we have a marketing guy, Clint, that helps us with the social media aspect and the database. And so our grant covers all of Florida, and then we're not going to turn our back on somebody because they're outside of Florida. It just means that we have to do that work outside of normal business hours or use volunteers to do it. And we faced that really early on. Within the first few days of launching our website, a woman from Colorado sent me an email asking if I would put her son on our website. And I thought, how can I possibly turn my back on this person?
How can you say that?
Yeah. they're just like me. So
That's right. That's right. And you gave them hope, you know. And so, how can families help law enforcement? What can they do?
So the biggest thing we've seen is don't do any investigating on your own.
Okay.
There's a couple misconceptions out there. One, everybody thinks that the FBI is the end all be all for investigations, and they're wonderful with terrorism, with white collar crimes, wire fraud, and that kind of stuff. They do amazing work, but their day to day jobs are not homicide investigations. They deal with some kidnapping, some human trafficking, and that kind of stuff. But I see a lot of families immediately go to the FBI and then are disappointed when the FBI doesn't take the case. But the reality of that is that a lot of times it's not FBI jurisdiction. And a lot of times you have the best capable investigator working on those cases as somebody that's connected to the community, that has investigated cases in that area, that already knows some of the potential, if it's gang related or drug related. They might have had contact with those people. So I always caution families when they want to run out and get a private investigator, or two, get the FBI involved. I always ask that they allow law enforcement that is in that jurisdiction to do their due diligence and do their best to solve that case. But they can share the information. They can raise money to increase the reward, do press conferences to show that you're increasing the reward. But with that, I would say I've always been told, if you're increasing the reward every month or every other month, then the bad guy's going to sit back and wait to see how big the reward gets,
Right.
or somebody that's got information. So you really should kind of pick a number. I've been told that $5,000 will usually make people turn in their own mother. So if you're in an area where Crime Stoppers already offers $2,000 or $3,000, see if you can do a little fundraiser or get your friends and family to connect and make up the difference to $5,000, and then ask to do a press conference.
Okay.
Get the media involved. The media can be a fickle thing, and when your case is hot and it's new, they're around. But if you wait 2 months, they've moved on to something else, and they may not be as willing to help you. But when those anniversaries roll around, 1, 5 years, 10 years, as horrible as it is that we wait that long, there's a lot of us that wait that long, and so you want to get them involved. But the other unfortunate thing is that they want to spend. They can't just go and say, "Oh, it's another 10-year anniversary of a murder victim that's unsolved," because they have so many of those. So, get involved with your community. We have organizations in Jacksonville, and I'm sure there are others around the country. Mad Dads goes around and does walks. Parents of murdered children, get involved with your support meetings. Get involved with your legislators and lawmakers, and just be a voice. You don't want to disappear. There is some truth to the greasy wheel, the squeaky wheel getting some grease. And so you don't want to disappear and just trust that everybody's doing what they say they're going to do, but you don't want to get in the way of it either.
Right. Well, and I think that, with today's technology, as you said, especially with social media, harnessing the power of social media to make all the difference in the world. And just a month ago, a friend of mine who lost her one daughter 3 years ago, and then a month ago lost her other daughter in a hit and run. And it was not solved. And so a friend created a flyer that was posted on Facebook, and a whole bunch of us shared it. And you never know who's going to see that. It doesn't have to be a professional flyer with, organizations, logos on it. It could just be a homegrown one, and ask people to share it. And,
Absolutely.
what's
Sorry.
that?
I was going to say, I do a lot of speaking engagements just to local civic groups, Rotary clubs, and that kind of thing. And inevitably, at the end of this engagement, I always get the question, well, what can we do to help? And it's hard because we're a nonprofit, so there's obviously the financial means of it. But I tell people, I got something you can do that is free, and it's not going to cost you a thing. like our Facebook page and share our spotlights and share our stories, because you never know who it's going to reach and when it's going to reach the right person. And we may never know. If we post something and somebody shares it and their friend shares it and their friend shares it and their friend shares it and somebody comes forward, it may never get back to us that was our post that led, to that information. But
Right.
It's not about getting recognition. It's about getting the information out there. And so I always tell them, and then I quickly run back to my phone and I check Facebook and I see how many new likes we have. And then I can gauge the audience on how well if they really meant it.
Yeah, because people want to be part of the solution. They want to see something good come from something bad. And so is Facebook the primary social media platform, or do you find that some of the others are useful as well?
So Facebook has been our biggest, it's helped us the most. We use Twitter and Instagram as well. And, I'll just admit it, I'm too old for Twitter. I really have a hard time understanding it and connecting with the other users. But that's why we brought in a young millennial to run our social media campaign, because and Twitter is a bit lost on me. But we get some good reactions on Twitter, and you never know. It's just like anything else. You get a peak where all of a sudden everybody's sharing and retweeting, and then you post something else and it's like nobody ever sees it. Our biggest enemy is the Facebook algorithms, because we never know if it's something that's going to get picked up and go viral, or if 4 people will see it.
It's hard to know. And since we're not on that side of Facebook, we just do the best that we can and share what we know. You've got some comments, so let me see if there's any questions for you.
Okay.
So Carolyn Burress says, we miss having compassionate families for victims of homicide. And so that is, I think, what the liaisons can do. I think that's what Project Cold Case can do. I'm not sure if Carolyn is referencing, compassionate families as in the law enforcement. I would think that, they have to keep their emotions out of it in order to focus on the details.
Yeah, so what Carolyn's talking about is, before I started Project Cold Case, there was an organization in town called Compassionate Families, and they helped all families that had lost loved ones to homicide. And I worked there for a number of years. Patty volunteered there. Carl Harms. You've done some work with Carl, done some books. He and I worked together there, and we really built something special in this community. And gave survivors an opportunity to just come together, whether it was with family picnics or support groups, those kinds of things. And it was an amazing thing to see at its best. And unfortunately, the founders of that have passed away, and it's no longer in existence. And there's a big need there within our community, and I think a lot of communities around the country, that you have to have these nonprofits, you have to have these organizations that are willing to support each other and to give survivors a place to come together and
hold that sacred space for those who need a safe place to cry and to vent and to make their loved one and speak the same lost language.
It's very true. It's very true. And, there are a number of national organizations, Parents of Murdered Children, and I'm not endorsing them because I've never actually worked with them, but I know they exist. There's a Compassionate Friends network that is for people that have lost children. And again, I don't have any experience with that, but I would encourage those suffering to try to reach out in your community and find out if you have anything like that and get involved in it, because it was a lifesaver for me. The support meetings, finding people that I could relate to that had experienced something similar. It also brought inspiration, because the first support meeting I went to, everybody there had lost children. I was the only one that had lost a parent. And so it kind of gave me perspective that I was supposed to bury my dad one day, just not the way I did.
Yeah.
But, for somebody to have to bury a child, as it was inspiring, and it gave me a glimpse. It gave me that hope that, wow, these people are still productive members of society. they're still able to smile, they're still able to laugh, they're still able to live life. It hasn't destroyed them, and if it hadn't destroyed them, then it's not going to destroy me. And that's what we're.
They give us hope that life's second act is survivable, and not only survivable, but it can be beautiful in its own way. And it's bittersweet because it's without our loved one, and that's not how we envision the rest of our life. But and you're doing it now. October 10th will be 9 years since your dad's murder. And so look how far you've come in 9 years, facing the unimaginable. And now here you are turning around and extending a helping hand to thousands of families behind you on the journey. That's inspiring.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I feel like, this was what I was born to do. I had to go through that horrible part to figure it out, but I am proud that we're able to offer some hope to other families, and that we're able to give them something that they're looking for. And, sometimes they don't know they're looking for it, and they think they can do it all themselves. And I tell people, well, you might be able to do it yourself, but why should you have to?
Right.
There's other people here that care and that want to help.
Helen Keller once said that walking with a friend in the dark is better than walking alone in the light. And, there's something about being surrounded by people who speak your lost language. You suddenly feel like you fit in with the world once again. Because when you've lost a loved one, especially to a homicide, and then especially to one that hasn't yet been solved, you suddenly feel like you're a square peg trying to fit into a round hole. And so surrounding yourself with others who have survived such a journey gives you hope and courage and strength to keep putting one foot in front of the other. So thank you for joining me tonight, Ryan. How can viewers contact you or get information about Project Cold Case and look for your advocacy services? What's the best way for them to reach out?
Yeah, well, first, thanks so much for having me, Linda. I've enjoyed this. It's always good to talk to you and catch up. And so the organization is Project Cold Case, and our website is projectcoldcase.org. We're on Facebook at Facebook/Project Cold Case, Twitter @Project Cold Case. Our email address is info@projectcoldcase.org. We encourage anybody to like our page, to share those stories. These families, their loved ones, deserve to be remembered, and these families deserve answers. And anything people can do to stay in touch. We have a newsletter that goes out. We try to be as active as possible on social media. And then our website is updated regularly with our database and our spotlights. So, please get involved with business.
Thank you for everything you do. And I wish, we did do Project Cold Case as part of the Grief Diary series.
Yes.
Sharing, 20-some?
22, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, from families who are part of Project Cold Case. I don't have it with me, or I'd hold it up. But it's a wonderful book written by families who have lost a child, a spouse, a sibling, a parent, and have been there and have, found how to put one foot in front of the other. And so it's really a lovely book. So thank you for doing that and for all that you do. And have a wonderful night, Ryan.
Thank you so much, Linda.
You take care. Stay safe down there in Florida, all right?
Well, you too. Stay warm up there.
We got a torrential rain last night, and with all the forest fires, we're very grateful. But it's like, wow, it's like a light switch went off from summer to autumn. It's like, I got to get my boots and my scarf.
Yeah, it's time.
All righty. Well, you take care. Have a wonderful night.
All right. Thanks so much, Linda.
All right. Bye, Ryan.